just so that everything that we have makes sense. So we did a new page.
Wait a minute. Do we want to do the action item now?
That's
It
next.
is next.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
sorry, Sue.
Nope, it's all good.
All right, so possible action item regarding contract negotiations. So, all right, yep. We need, we can't vote on it. We're moving it to the board.
You're just adding it to the budget. The
Adding it to
motion
our
should,
budget.
the motion should be to add that dollar amount to
the
that
budget.
line
Okay.
item.
So
That line.
motion, I'd like to make a motion to add the dollar amount just discussed in executive session to the 23-24 budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. 23-24 budget.
Okay. So you got a lot of paper.
Mhm.
Just want to make some sense of the paper that you have. So we gave you a new page 1 through 6 because we did some cleaning up, adjusting, all those things that regularly happen after we send out our first one. And that will walk through answers to your questions as well. I think that the biggest help will be this guide sheet which Scott created, which I think is really nice. And then you can see there were mostly reductions. There were a few additions as we were correcting things. And then it goes on to the back, so you can see our age percentage as well. Come up and join us, please. Come to the big kid table. Thank you. You can sneak in the back. So those two go together. And we'll come back to start with those.
Okay.
But then in addition, just so that you have these for your reference, you have that RBT sheet, the parent sheet, the let's see,
The ELL sheet.
Yep, the ELL sheet. So this is kind of the mixed media there. This is mixed budgets, right? This tells you all the budgets, but it tells you the position and where those positions are budgeted. So that's one way of looking at it. And then the other packet, I think, is in green for St. Patrick's Day for tomorrow. And we'll keep trying to color code these as they change, or if they change. These are all the grant updates. So you see the Alliance, the IDEA, the entitlement grants. And I mentioned last time we met that we will have to apply for the 2% should the board decide. These positions are in there right now and were calculated in, we did it last year, we've actually done it for the last 2 years. If we do it next year, it will be our 3rd year, but we would have to notify the city if we are going to move to the 2%. This is money that we apply to the state, we let them know, but we also need to let the city know. And it usually runs about that 478 or 80 when we do that 2%.
So statutorily, we're allowed to request 2% of the ECS to come directly to the Board of Education. That used to not be done, but the last several years, we've requested that money to come directly to us.
Have we gotten it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
If we request it, it has to
Oh,
be
okay.
sent to us.
Okay.
It created.
How much is that?
Usually about 475, 480, 490.
So you would expect that to replace the IDEA?
No, wouldn't replace
Okay.
anything. It would fill positions.
Oh,
So
okay.
it would still cover these positions that are already
okay.
there. If the board says, no, we don't want to apply for that, we have to find another place for those positions. So I just wanted people to know that as we're going through the budget.
Yeah. So just be
Yeah.
a short version. So just say we were to get a 0 budget,
Yeah,
we
We
would
could-
have the increase of the 463.
but we're gonna ask for that anyway, right? We would ask for that anyway.
If the board wants, we've only done that the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't we?
Well, that's up to the board. So I just
Okay.
wanted to put that out there right now. We do have positions in there this year. We are planning for them in the 2% next year, but that's for the board to decide to go through stuff.
Okay.
The board also asked for a list of dues and fees, so you have that as well. And then there were questions about behavior, behaviorists, BCBAs, RBTs, and Laura created flow charts and descriptions, which I think in subsequent years, we're gonna actually put in the budget binder. So thank you, Laura. And then Sue did some descriptions for us of coaches and interventionists. So you can see that part of the puzzle as well. So that will go in our budget binders. And then Joanne did just a nice snapshot on the EL and bilingual services. So everybody has kind of a descriptor, just a reminder of the services that we have in our various areas, in SPED, in OTL. So I think that's helpful. Sure.
I know I'm pretty versed in the education alphabet, but DLC.
Developmental learning class, that's life skills
Got
prior
it. Oh,
to.
okay. Thank you.
But Laura's gonna go through, I'm just gonna have a few words to kind of frame the discussion, and we'll share some of this as well, so we'll highlight it. But it probably would make most sense to start with the 1 through 6 and the questions that you have.
Okay.
How's that? Yep. Okay. So when last we met, on page 1 of 6, there was a question about the psychologist and the increase. So last year, the new salary, this current year essentially was never updated. And so that person is still in the position. She was hired at a higher rate, but now it's compounded. So it looks like it's a lot, but it's still that same person. So that's why when I was turning to Laura and Kim, they're saying, no, there's no new person, but you see that jump there.
Which
So
line are we referencing?
you're referencing the one that says psychologist, 5111.46. Okay, on page 1. So that is a real number. That is the salary. And then it also has the step increases at all the various schools as well. So it's a compilation of all of
And
them.
how many psychologists does that make up?
We have 1 psychologist at each school.
Okay,
Okay. But the bulk of that increase, or that 10% change, is from
across the board. Oh, from the high
From the
school?
high school, and then the
Okay.
step increase, because that high school salary wasn't increased. That was missed as we went from Lynn to Ed to Scott.
Okay,
Transition, and there'll be a couple of those things.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's the 10%.
That just happened. Yep. And then we made sure that we clarified 5111.50. I'm still on page 106, and that's the stipends. And we accounted for all our coordinator stipends there, and so we adjusted that number. It wasn't correct, so we needed to fix it. Okay. And then the stipend right down below, 5111.57, stipend for arts, drama, music. The $20,005 wasn't included, and so that's just an omission. So we made sure that that was in there. We certainly need that for next year. And similar to the stipend that you see underneath the stipend for guidance, because that was omitted as well.
And that's for summer work, right?
The guidance,
Yeah.
no, she takes on more responsibilities during the year. It's at the high school. Yep. Thank you for asking. And then it was pointed out, if we go down to non-certified salaries, 5112.03 CODA. And then if you look down just a little bit, where it says 5112.25 occupational therapy, that line was condensed, so everybody was in CODA. And so we had to separate them out because we still have occupational therapists, and then we also have occupational therapist assistants. So we have 3 occupational therapist assistants. One is, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's like 2 point something.
Yeah.
And then our occupational therapy, then we have 2 occupational therapists in that 5112.25 line item. So it was just it was entered in the wrong area. No biggie. Board clerk, we fixed the salary, and subsequently we'll adjust again. And then on page 2, at the very top, 5120, the sub salaries. That is not a typo. There really is no need. Scott and I talked with John, and that was for custodial, but now that we have enough custodians at each site and we have a district-wide floater, we really don't need that sub-custodial. He really doesn't feel that that's necessary, so that's a savings, so that stays exactly as is. So that was good news. 5130.80, however, we did need to make sure that we fix the OT, because that is definitely needed, and that did go up a little bit. John made sure he looked at the usage at various schools, and then we adapted that. So that went up to almost 88,000. Someone had asked a question from the high school page. It was a high school summary page, and that was on high school tutors. And there was a reduction of 39,936. What we decided to do instead was do district-wide tutors. So it's actually in 5100, 1037, 5121. So that we really can make sure that we have that for expulsions, we have it for middle school, we have it for high school, and sometimes we even need it for elementary. But it really does help us have a little more flexibility in terms of our needs. So we adjusted it, we had to increase it a little bit, and it does make more sense. But there was a reduction there. That is correct. So the other adjustments that you see on this page, it's just, there was a formulaic problem. So we had a formula issue. So we had to make sure that we adjusted. It was kind of a confusing year too, because Ben Paras are getting a little bit more because of what was just agreed upon. So there was some adjusting there to do. And then you'll see the rest of the adjustments that we spoke about, and that brings us to a 3.93% increase from this current year. So we're moving in the right direction. And I know Laura shaved off a little bit off of some of her services she booked historically, and really felt like she could cut a little bit from tuitions and things like that. So not people, just things.
So most of the items on this budget changes list are just a result of error, some kind of formulaic or error.
Yeah, just issues because of so many adjustments that happened really in the last short bit of time. Even from when we designed or we created this budget. Remember, that was February, and that's such a long time ago when we do budgets.
Well, so I guess, I mean, what I'm hearing is you're pretty confident in these
Yes.
and the new numbers. So
Yep.
to the point that the TEA brought before us a little while ago about the sped teachers, I'm not going to tell the student services folks how many people they think they do or don't need, but you know, to my mind, if there's substantial savings elsewhere due to input error, then are those reductions in authorized head counts really necessary? And is it possible that we would benefit from keeping those positions back in? And I'm pretty sure that would still keep us below your original 4.75% request.
So I'm going to defer to Laura. That's her area of expertise.
So could we benefit? Sure. If you want us to take it, we will. As far as the determination of what we needed, like we've done every year since I've been here, we go through every single kid, including the students currently in interventions that we anticipate will be coming. We look at children that aren't even in interventions, but maybe are like red flag, that, you know, might end up. The supervisors and I sit, and they are the ones that come forward. The teachers give what their current caseload would be for moving forward, and then we add in the kids that are in the pipeline. Absolutely, we can have kids that move in. We could also have some that move out. That's always going to happen. I can't guarantee that somewhere down the road next year, I might not say, I had 5 new kids come in that need the voices program. I need another voices teacher. I can't control that. But, we make the best guess on where we are right now. As far as the caseloads go, they don't post things, but I belong to an organizational called Concase, which is all the administrators in special education. And we have regular monthly meetings. I reached out to them to ask them what their current resource caseloads, and I could certainly get that. But for example, we talked about the middle school. I have us projected next year to be at 20 to 21 caseload for resource room teachers, region 15 right now. And I would recommend that we look at our DERG and not a New Canaan or, schools down that way. But we're at 20 to 21 projected for next year, and region 15 is at 26 right now. So we are right where we need to be. I think you know me well enough to know if I need something, I'm going to ask for it. If I don't, I'm going to be fiscally responsible. Having said that, you want to give me another 2.8 teachers? Sure, give them to me. I'll figure out something to do with them. But as far as the numbers go, we really don't need it. I had mentioned that, one of the cuts that we were looking to make was at one of our elementary schools. If we didn't make the cut, the resource room teachers would have caseloads of 10 and 12. I have more than that in some of our self-contained programs. So I'm trying to be fiscally responsible and really cannot rationalize that. And even the supervisor who's there and lives it came and said that. As far as the added work from CT SEDS, absolutely across the whole state. We are going to have 3 of our special ed teachers go to these presentations by the state. One of them is sitting around this table. And he's going to actually explain how easy he thinks it will make everyone's life and how he has moved forward with it and has really learned how to use it. We have stated all along, we provided really solid training in the beginning, and we felt that our people were actually a little bit ahead of the curve. Having said that, we are getting a nice stipend from the state, as is every single district that participated. Well, we all just participated because they all have to do it. And it was based on the number of IEPs that we have. So we have $20,000 coming in. And speaking with the directors across the state and talking about how to divide it up. We did it based on an hourly rate and how much time people had put in. So our special ed supervisor who ran the whole thing and one of our secretaries who's really taking care of the bulk of that are getting a nice chunk, but then every single trainer is getting a very nice stipend. Every single special education teacher, I am making sure that they get something, in addition to all of the related service people, which do not even do as much as the SPED teachers. It still was implemented by the state. Once again, we were flying that plane and building it at the same time. Probably should have held off. It would have been easier for everyone. They didn't. We did what we could do. Our people were very positive, very enthusiastic. We were afraid when we presented at the beginning of the year that they were going to be like, and they were not. They were positive and they've embraced it and they've learned how to do it. So I'm excited to have our 3 special ed teachers that are trainers go to the state meetings and talk about Torrington's experience with the program. So yeah, I'm not saying our job is easy. It's not, but I feel like, believe me, if I felt we needed 5 more special ed teachers, I would be coming to you and I'd be showing you why. Right now, we don't feel that that's the case. So.
No, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want anybody or you to think that what I'm doing here is trying to hold you to account for anything. I'm just sort of interested in resolving any potential friction. So I guess my last sort of thought would be, what's the sort of margin, that's the word I'm looking for, where like how many additional students could move into the district before you'd feel like you had to come back and say, now I really need you to post a SPED position?
Yeah, it's not even really into the district. It's into the school and into the buildings. So, for example, one year, I don't remember how many years ago this was, but we thought we were going to need a second Thrive program. at the primary level. And then there was shifting, and we no longer needed that. So we were able to adjust. Typically, if you look at my numbers, like month to month, we really are kind of, status quo. Yes, we'll have several move in, but we'll also have several move out. We have children that become homeless, are put in foster homes here, then they're back out. So we keep an eye on the numbers all the time. As soon as the supervisors begin to see, wow, this is getting difficult, then we move on that. Earlier in the year, we were afraid that we were going to need another Thrive program at Forks, because at that point, the numbers were getting a little bit high, and we started to talk about it in central office, that we might need to do that. Then subsequently, 2 children moved out, and another child was able to move out of there into a regular, a less restrictive program. And so it was much more doable. So then the supervisor said to me, we don't need to do that right now. So that's the type of thing. It doesn't really answer your question. I can't give you a number. There aren't any numbers I have to adhere to that, I can only have this many in this kind of a program, but we want it to be reasonable that, that the teacher is able to teach. And in some of the self-contained programs, there's a lot of the kids need like one-to-one kind of support. So then there's a lot of adult bodies in there. So how big can you make that classroom before you're like, well, we need another room because there's not even enough bodies. So it's all those factors together, trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Go ahead, John.
State told us that SEDS is going to make things much more efficient, for instance, by standardizing the forms and the procedures, which would translate into, I suppose, eventually money, but that's not going to happen over the next year or two, is it?
I don't see it yet. I think that it is going to affect the efficiency of, eventually it's going to be easier. So for example, one of whenever we used to have any kind of a meeting, we had to create a whole new draft of an IEP. Well, now there is something called a record of meeting. So if you're not having an annual review, you could just create a record of meeting, which takes substantially less time. I should be letting you discuss this rather than me, but it's substantially less time to do that. So that will allow for more teaching time. So eventually the problem is we still are battling problems with the system. We'll call it the help desk and they'll say, yes, we're aware of that problem, we're working on it. So there's a lot of that going on still across the state. And everybody's just taking it with a grain of salt and doing the best we can.
If I just, not that it's really affecting budget, but I enjoy the system because I think that it allows for a logical flow of creating an IEP that is geared as best as possible to the student. There are glitches in the system. There is more training that needs to happen. I am one of the lucky ones that I got to go to the expert training. There are teachers who are learning this on the fly, and it's taking a lot of time for them to, they're flying the plane as they're building it. And for some of them, they're first or second year teachers who are still trying to learn special ed on top of trying to learn a new system. This is the third IEP system that I've been in the district. I started out almost 20 years ago on Microsoft Word, creating IEPs and creating fillable documents through Microsoft Word. So it does allow for a logical and thoughtful process for developing an IEP that will help to deliver services that are important to the student and needed by the student. But again, the training needs to take place. There is a lot of time that goes into it. In our contractual hours, there is not enough time in my contractual hours to do my testing, to do my IEP writing, to do my meetings, and to do my planning for 5 different classes and then teach. Contractually, there's not enough hours for me to do all of that. There never is for any teacher, regular ed or special ed. So that is something that we're always battling. More help helps to alleviate that. And a comment that I was gonna make was one that Laura said is, I don't think administration would turn down an increase in anything that is going to help students, because I know that one of the initiatives that Laura has done with the supervisors is looking for a number of objectives that are mastered.
Right.
And those numbers would be interesting over the last couple of years that we've done it, to see what is that percentage of mastered objectives, and can we increase that number by potentially lowering caseload numbers, because then we're able to give more attention to fewer students. So yes, the supervisors feel that we can do with what we have, but we can definitely do more with more. I mean, no one will ever turn down money. I know Laura will. So, but she also has to be fiscally responsible, and I understand where she's coming at, but as a teacher, if you're willing to give it, we will take it.
Right.
Right. And one other thing about the training. So I think we've done a pretty good job with trying to train our people as much as we can, but our RESC and the state are really trying to help. For example, today, there was an online training on how to do an exit. You know, and my sister, who's a special ed teacher in Stratford, happened to be on it, and she was like, oh, it was really helpful, like, to figure out how to do it. On top of that, I've already asked Jason and another one of our trainers if next year, I used to do this all the time for IEP Direct. Next year, when we have new staff come on, we are going to ask Jason and another trainer to do the as Connecticut CT SEDS Training 101 for all the new people, so that they're getting something, and eventually the whole state is using it, so people will be coming in with the experience, but right now it's just too new.
It also helps because from district to district, so if a student comes into the district, we used to have to wait for their central office to send us hard copies of all of those documents. Now it's a push of a button and it's in our system. So it's a much more efficient system. And I had gone to a follow-up training and met with Brian
Klimkowitz.
And said to him how much I enjoyed the system, and he wanted to record me saying that because he hasn't really heard that from many people. So as a very type A personality, if you know me, very logical and things in place, it makes sense, and it will help in the long run. We just have to get it.
Right, good. Well, that's good to know. Good. I have a couple questions, just clarification. And we probably, I don't know if we need to go back to that. I personally am not comfortable not filling the positions that were there. I'm afraid that if we lose them, we'll never get it back. So I don't know if we should probably talk about that a little bit more. As far as the new reading program that you talked to us about last night, is that in the budget?
That's hopefully, and that'll be another board discussion, some out of GB and some out of ARPA 3. And that's for this year and next year, that carries over. So but we really want to get that purchase before the end of this fiscal.
Okay, so we'll use what money we have now, right? Okay, so it will be paid
So
for.
it won't appear in this.
Okay,
At all.
all right, okay. But as long as it's being paid for, that was my, yeah, whether it's this year, next year, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so looking at the breakdown of the Fed paras, RBTs, BCBAs, coaches. I think we have a good idea of what everyone's roles are. The coaches that are listed here, those come from Alliance, right? Those positions come from our Alliance budget. I'm on the green sheet, page 1.
Yep, those particular ones come from Alliance, yeah.
Okay, so now is the coach positions, it looks like there's one at every school, 2 at Torrington, 2 at Southwest.
There's 2 at every school, but
there is
they're out of different funds. They're not
different
all out
funding.
here.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
2 at every school. I mean, I'm just gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna put out there, is it something that we could look at consolidating?
You mean reducing coaches?
I don't know, not reducing them, but reallocating somehow? Is there, like, what do I personally, maybe others on the board know, I'm not familiar with what the benefits that we're seeing from this money. It's over almost $1 million. So let's talk about
So I
the
gave
benefits to,
of the coaching model.
yeah.
Sure. So I passed out a little sort of narrative that, you know, I'm certainly not going to read to you, but we can talk through it. And you can read it at your leisure. This one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is what coaches do.
Right, it says what coaches do, and then at the bottom, it's what an interventionist do.
I'm looking at the
Yeah,
sped one. Hold on.
Yep, yep. Three pages for, you know, more dangerous.
Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry, got it. Okay, so, all right, we just have a second to read it.
Sure.
Okay, really quick. So where did the coaches fall, and are these union positions?
Yes, they're teachers.
They're teachers,
Yeah.
okay. So being teachers, do they share the responsibilities that all the other teachers have? Do they have duties? Do they have to do things? Do they help pick up the slack where it's needed?
Our coaches are plugged in, scheduled in from the time they arrive till the time they, yes.
And they're
yes.
in the buildings every day,
Every
Yes.
single day,
in every school.
in every school, in every classroom. Yes.
They're invaluable, Sue.
I'm not suggesting that they're not invaluable. I just don't know if there's consistency throughout the buildings on what the coaches are doing and should be doing. So if they're
I
not,
can speak to the middle school because that's the only school that I work in, but I know that Sandy's here and I'm sure she can speak to the elementary school, but I know that our math and our ELA coaches are constantly in classrooms, helping teachers, working with students. They're helping with testing.
Mhm.
They are constantly on the go
That's good.
with packed schedules. So I can speak for the middle school that they are worth their weight in gold.
that's
They
great.
model lessons, they
Yes.
co-teach.
I just, it seems like they're in, I don't want to sound like a, somebody on social media just saying something that's not factual, but in talking with the professionals in our district, I'm not sure that the consistency is across the board. John, you have something?
I had a chance to talk to Mr. Klein on Monday about this exact topic when I toured Ford. You want to say it or you want me to?
I'm happy to talk about it. Last year, when we were looking at our STAR data, and we cross-referenced the amount of time that our teachers spent with our coaches, our teachers that met with our coaches 2 or more times had growth rates of 150%, which means that our kids were growing on average a year and a half's growth,
Uh-huh.
which in a 2-year run for us means that kids would grow by 3 years in the 2-year period, which is absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
Teachers that met with our coaches once during a cycle last year grew by between 115% and 125%.
Okay.
And our classrooms where they did not meet with a coach, on average, it was less than 100% growth for those students.
Okay.
This year, we're seeing the same trend, but the best part is every single one of my teachers is meeting with a coach. Our coaches work with teachers nonstop throughout the day. They meet before school, they meet after school, they meet during their planning, during their lunchtimes.
Okay.
They review lessons. They work on craft and practice.
Mhm.
And honestly, in Forbes, it's transformed the work that our students do, most importantly. That's where we're seeing so much growth.
Really good to hear. That's good information. It sounds like Marianne is similar.
Very much. I mean, the coaches, like Jason said, are invaluable. They work well beyond even their contractual hours. They just did all the training for the teachers all across the district. Professional development, how to improve our instructional strategies
Great.
in all of our classrooms.
Good.
So now we're following up with our accountable top walkthroughs and everything.
Okay,
and
good.
seeing it in action.
Excellent.
So yes,
Okay.
I can't live without our coaches. So just to tell you that.
I would absolutely agree, and
Yeah,
to think about, we have 2 coaches,
yeah.
and they impact every single child.
Okay, good. And you're-
Yeah,
you're
I
good?
honestly want more coaching. You know, it's not
Yep.
something I want to address the budget, but I would take more.
Okay,
It has such an impact. And
okay,
you can see it even just in a 6-week cycle. They take pre and post the cycle that they're in,
yep,
and you can see the growth.
you see it, that, okay.
Yep.
So if we could see that, that would be great.
The data?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
regularly, like whether we do it monthly or bi-monthly or something, because we haven't had any of that. You know, we've had the high level star results, but that's important information, that.
But all that is
Should be shared.
impacted, yeah, all that is impacted by
That's
the,
huge,
Right,
the teacher, the coaches are doing.
yeah,
right. So
Okay.
the coaches, honestly, they are kind of our building-based
mhm,
professional staff developers. So we use a trainer of trainer models. So,
okay, oh,
you know,
okay,
we're doing this work with literacy, how that you've heard us speak about
Right.
so much. And our coaches are involved in that training, and then they're able to turnkey that learning into every classroom in the district.
that they go into
Right, because
Yep.
there's no physical way for us
to do
to
it,
do it with
Right.
everybody,
Yep.
right? So,
okay,
I mean, that's just another thing that they do. They sit on our SST team, student success teams.
Yeah.
They, the leadership teams, they're in the classrooms, co-teaching and modeling lessons and
okay,
then working with teachers. They work with new teachers.
okay. So we should get this type of information more than just at budget time, because that's really helpful to have. Maybe everybody else knew about this. I wasn't aware of, but I don't think any of us knew what they were doing to the extent they were doing it, but it's important for us to know that, especially if we're spending upward of $1 million on these positions. You know, it's nice to be able to
Yeah, sure. we can-
recognize that
I
and-
can
and
put that
understand what
together,
they're doing.
absolutely, for the board. We can do that.
just high level,
Yeah,
like,
I just want to just say, I think if we were to lose coaches,
Mhm.
and let me phrase it differently. I think the only way we are really going to shift what we're doing, large scale, the way we're trying to,
is with these
is-
positions.
yes.
Yeah. That's why I looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, as I often do.
Yeah.
And so I know that you've been an advocate looking for additional help in general ed classrooms.
Yeah, and that's it
And
then.
this is it in
Okay.
a certified manner.
Yeah, okay, that's
So,
great.
yeah.
That's, that's really helpful information.
And how do they determine which teachers they're working with? I mean, does every teacher meet with them throughout the year? Do some meet?
Well, you heard
Twice
Michael
a
say now at Forbes, that's
Right, one,
happening,
two,
but I
okay.
think last year it wasn't. It was more just looking at the cycles and what the building needs are.
Ours are student data driven, so depending on student level proficiency, level growth, those are typically where it's based on student data, how we select which teachers are in the next.
And they're all included in like the duties and all of everything.
Their duties are a little more flexible because their schedules have to be flexible, so like when we do inventory at the end of the year, they're doing that. When we get the new reading materials, guess who's passing them out? Like theirs are a little different than what we typically would have, like, you know, standing out at a bus. And that's also because they're on a teacher's contract and we work 7 hours and 20 minutes. We have to be creative in how we can provide teachers co-planning time. That's like the magic. That's where the magic happens, is co-planning. And so when they co-plan with a coach, we take a teacher off their bus duty, but coaches have to coach every single teacher in the building. So that's when that's happening.
They do grade level meetings often too, so they might not be able to go out to recess because they need to be at a grade level meeting. So their duties might look different.
But they're there.
We also use them in my building to support our new teachers at the beginning of the year.
Right,
So
okay.
every new teacher went through the first coaching cycle at the beginning of the year. And then our second round was teachers that they achieved grade levels last year to help them to learn the new curriculum that they're learning. And then we moved over to using data to decide who's there. But the expectation is that every teacher in the building will go through the cycle. At least one.
Those are real, that's really amazing improvement over the course of the year. Ellen?
So these coaches, are there less in Alliance this year than last year? Are we moving them towards TV so that we can keep them?
There hasn't been as much movement in the coaches. They have predominantly remained in Alliance. We could do more shifting. in that particular area for that particular position.
Just to keep them, because there's such a abuse,
Right,
just about.
yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think our
And that's-
goal is ultimately to not be an alliance district, and then we,
Right, but we hate to lose
right,
them.
and you just, yeah, look at this and make movements, Jason.
I have to say, initially, I thought that's what your question was
What?
have we moved them from Alliance to GB?
Oh,
And so
no.
then when you went the way that you did, I got a little concerned. So I was hoping you were looking to get them into GB to be a more permanent
No, we're
basis.
not
So
cutting, it's just it's educating us, educating me on the positions and what they're doing and just the numbers that Michael's just shared with us, that's incredible. And I think that's worth sharing with the community on what we're
Teaching-
spending our money on.
Yeah, teaching is just by design kind of a lonely profession in some ways, because if, you know, you're in your classroom, you're the only adult in the room oftentimes. So to have a colleague to kind of bounce ideas off of and partner with and help each other, challenge each other to learn and grow is a very powerful model.
Yeah,
And the other, I think, really valuable feature of a coaching teaching relationship is that the coaches are teachers too. They're not administrators. They do not evaluate. They are non-threatening. You know, a teacher is going to be much more likely to be vulnerable with a coach and say, hey, listen, this is something I'm really struggling to understand. Please help me.
Yeah.
So
Good.
it's.
Yep. And
Just in regards to moving these folks out of Alliance, the trick here is that we can't move existing positions back into Alliance. So we created these positions when we got the Alliance grant, if I recall correctly. Also because they meet the standard that you have to meet for things that you can pay for with Alliance. So I would be reluctant to move them out of there at the moment because, well, we have other things that are in other grants that are more pressing to move into general budget. And we'll get a really clear signal if we're going to get removed from the Alliance program list, but even making progress as we have. That's not
still
happening
in
for
the next couple
quite some
years.
time.
Yeah.
And there may not necessarily be as impactful things that we can put in the Alliance grant because it's restrictive, would be my consideration.
I wasn't suggesting taking them out now, just for the future,
Keep an eye
because
out.
it's so important, just to have it in the back of our mind that yes, this.
My other thing,
Okay, yeah.
keep this one, is, so it took me a minute to find where it lived, but to backfill the open sped positions, the 2.8, puts us at, I think, this is some back of the napkin math, but it would still put us at about a 4.245% increase. So there would still be a reduction from your original proposal.
Not huge.
Not a big one. It would still, it would be a pretty material increase to the proposal, but so, I wanted to bring it up with a
Right.
sort of an amount attached to it, right? Because we have the dollar amount, the 246, 128. And then, so to just stick it back into the percentages list, puts it about 4.25, which I would be content with, I think.
Can I just ask, how exactly are you determining that though? Because we don't know what their salaries are gonna be, right?
Right, I'm using.
Just based
I'm
on
using
the
superintendent's-
retirees' salaries. based
Oh,
on what was
okay.
in the
So
budget.
it actually could be
Be
less,
Because they
okay,
were-
because most of them are
Longevity.
up there.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha.
Oh, so it could even, yeah.
Yeah. I was using the superintendent's number as a sort of conservative estimate, but yes, if they were new hires,
Right.
right, brand new teachers, yeah, they'd be substantially cheaper.
Okay, great.
Um,
I'm
But-
not opposed to keeping those positions in the budget.
right, well, and that's also why I said it's back then, I've been mad, because, I assume the budget folks would put in the appropriate number based on what they assume they'd be hiring them at.
And there would be flexibility in where they would go. They wouldn't necessarily have to, it would be nice if they're filling the positions that they've left, but if the need is greater elsewhere, there is the possibility of them going.
Right, so, right, because you have to remember, when we said we do the entire district.
Right.
So, just thinking, where is the greatest need? Well, the greatest need may be doing evaluations. coming around and doing, all the testing for you guys.
Right.
Yeah, so it would be a matter of looking at how we could best, I don't know,
Right.
use them, because again, if I have 10 kids in a resource room, I'm not gonna put another resource room teacher at that elementary school.
Right, and
Okay,
my,
so-
my angle here is essentially listening to what we're hearing, right?
Yep.
That there's always gonna be some kind of use. My angle
Sure.
isn't to tell you what you should be doing,
Sure.
but if we could put them back in the
I
budget.
do
I'm
have
sure you'd
one
find-
suggestion, though. One of the positions being cut is that 0.8 position, and that position is at the high school. She's retiring. We actually kept her on this year, and quite honestly, they had difficulty really kind of finding things for her to do. So I truly don't believe that, number one, we need it, and number two, that we're gonna find the 0.8. We're not going to. So I would suggest that maybe if you want to keep the 2, you keep the 2.
Or keep it a 3. Hold on, Fiona was next, and John, Dick or Kathy, whoever had a. Go ahead.
I'd like to suggest that we use one of those positions to fund a proper tag program, so that we're not trying to fit it into people's schedules. And I'm so happy with everything you guys tried to do this year, but there really wasn't money attached to it. So I think if that's something the board wants to support, I think we either need to support it or not support it, not kind of support it. You know what I mean? So
So if say we agreed to make it 3 positions,
It's in mind.
I'm just processing. So, no, so when you're saying would you say a true position?
Tag.
Tag
A real
teacher.
position.
tag.
Oh, a tag.
A tag person.
A tag.
A tag.
A full-time
someone to work with our
tag.
talented
Gotcha.
gifted kids.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, that's great. I don't, I think if we're looking at all the needs, again, for the department, I don't know if a full-time tag teacher would be the first place I would look. As Jason said, I think that the evaluation process is a lot, and like
Well,
you
if there
said,
were
the hours.
3 if there were 3 positions,
And they deserve an education too, like sitting out in
Yeah,
the
no, I
hall,
get ya.
tutoring other kids is
Right.
not really an education
No,
for them. They
yeah.
deserve opportunities.
giving them the
too.
opportunities, right?
So
That
not
they're not gonna
necessarily that
get.
goes into salary, but the dollar amount goes to the tag program.
Well, I don't want
No,
them to be,
no,
I
no,
don't think they
have
should
a
be
tag
squished
teacher.
into someone's schedule.
Right. Well, we were looking to see how to add like a period at the middle school. For example, or at the high school, where maybe a special ed teacher was assigned 1 period to do tag. So we could certainly do it and figure out what it would look like if they did across the district, they did like the primary, and I don't know how you break it up, but
And I just think we're putting these kids through all this testing,
Mhm.
doing all these things, identifying them, and then we're not really able to do anything with them. So either don't do all that or actually provide them a program.
But we have to do that because by law, we need to identify them.
Right.
What we don't have to do is provide a program. So that's the optional piece. So regardless, if someone is being referred because there's a belief that they're gifted, they're given 1 test. It's not all this testing, it's the COGAT, the IQ measure. Then the rest of that comes from their performance in school and the teacher recommendations. So it's not a ton of testing, but it is still testing. And I agree that it would be great if we, can provide them with more. This year, we've just kind of tried to pilot what we could.
And we
with
also
what we
didn't
had.
fund it, so I'm not saying
I
it's
know, I
anyone's
know.
fault, there wasn't funding. I strongly believe we should be serving all our kids at what they need.
Right,
And I just think that those kids always get
pushed by the wayside.
pushed by the wayside.
When I was here 20 years ago, there was a very robust tag program. I mean, there was an entire computer lab on the 3rd floor at the middle school that was dedicated. And I thought it was named after me. It was the Jason lab. And I thought, wow, I've got a computer lab named after me. And come to find out, it was Carol Bean, who, and it was a very robust tag program that TPS had and prided itself on. With the programming that
One of my
was done.
daughters was in it when it was back in elementary
was
school,
great.
and they did field trips and did all kinds of special things, and It was a great program and I would like to see it get back there again too. But they were kind of sidebarring over here talking about, you know, if we could keep the 2.8 or round it up to 3 positions in the budget and make a half of, is it half, like, what would you
Like
say,
half-
half
half-
of one is a tag?
Right, so, because they're
their
still,
duties
they're
be
still
tag
in
related.
your department, right? So, and if they're still special ed teachers, right, if they do half-time tag teaching, and then if you were to, as long as you're able to find other duties for the other
Sure.
half-time, we can
Oh,
then,
we can find duties.
right? Then we can hire them full-time, right? Because we're not gonna find a part-time person.
No, we
So
won't.
we could hire them full-time and still meet the needs of the tag program, right? If it's not a full-time,
I think
Job.
it's different expertise. though.
Yeah,
I don't
it
think it's the
is.
same
It
person.
is. It's gonna be a little bit of a challenge, because sometimes people go into gifted education and that's what they want to do. So if I'm gonna say, well, you're gonna do half gifted and half, I don't know. I don't know how that'll fly, but if I can maybe roll it in with testing, district testing, because they may be agreeable to doing something like that, we can make it work, absolutely.
so I think we're probably all in agreement that we want to put some money and a person into the tag program. So I guess I'm just really then wondering what's the best way for us to structure the funding to make it workable for you? You know, 'cause I think we'll probably, you know, as long as it's not an egregious amount, we'll fund it in whatever mechanism needs to be done, whether that's a full-time position or stipends, kind of whatever you need that makes sense. I just don't know.
So I guess we probably have to go and maybe we can talk about it too, with what kind of, what's our vision? Like, what do we see it looking like? Obviously, we don't need it at the high school because you've got your AP and whatnot, but up, if we're gonna do it up through 8th grade, you know, what does it look like? Are we talking like one period every day? Are we talking, like, how is it gonna look? Because different districts do it differently. Some will do 1 day a week, but they'll do a full day. And then they might have museums and like other things built in. So I think it would be a matter of, if you want, I could kind of put together what it might look like. And then I could bring it forward and see what you think. And it might be a couple of different options. And then however we think it's the best way to proceed. And we would need additional materials too, guys.
So what was
Just
the
saying.
cost of that? be?
I think it would be a good thing to have a robust tag program, and maybe either retain kids or attract kids back, bring kids back.
Into
We have people who move here for our special ed program, serving the body that it does. It'd be nice to be able to keep people because we had a program that
Gifted
served
program.
the other kids that are really, and you talk about underserved, our brightest kids are
Right.
underserved.
Yeah,
And as far as keeping people, keeping these in the budget, these positions, as we found out, you can put a position in the budget, but not necessarily hire for it until you need it.
right, good point.
So we
Why
might not
take it
end up
out and
spending the
then-
money, but it'll
right.
be there if we need it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Can I
That's what I was
just
gonna
share
say.
something? When I first started teaching in
Positions
this
in the budget.
district, Torrington was a spotlight district for talented and gifted education at the state level, remember? We were following the Red Zoo model. We had all kinds of other districts coming into Torrington to observe what was happening here. It was a very exciting time. It was to get back to that, yeah.
Jeff,
I'm the talented and gifted. I fully support that. I support a full-time person. There's 5 buildings for taking the high school out of the equation. That's a full-time person, 1 building per day, or, you know, 2 half days. You could split it up.
Yep.
I think if you have that many students, there's 4,000 students in this district, or 3,000 if you take the high school out. That's a lot for 1 person to cover, even the percentage of people who qualify based on testing.
Right.
Be good to
So
bring
the
back.
other thing is you were asking about the cost. So there'll need to be additional district-wide testing for qualification purposes. So it need to be the COGAT, or probably the COGAT is what's typically used for gifted. We would need to go across the board with that. And I don't know how young you want to start. Like if we would want to include the primary too. A lot of districts don't start doing gifted programming until like 3rd grade. But however you want to do it. So there's just too much right now in my brain.
Well, let's table it.
So
but
can I
let's-
like kind of try to put some ideas together and then come back?
I think we all know we're on, is it related to? Tab?
Nope.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm gonna move on, it's a flat line item and the HSA deductible on page 206, 5210-01. It's a set amount per contract, but it's not changing from one year to the next, and I know that there's position changes. So wouldn't there be a change in the HSA deductible if we're not filling certain positions currently? So I'm just wondering why that's funded at the same level. I know there's no increase because it's not a percentage increase, it's staying the same, but if we're not having as many, we're 2.8 right now, special ed teachers and whatever else. So is that a line item that should see decreased a little?
We'll watch it, but
Okay.
really, we don't usually change that until a little later in the game,
Okay.
once everything is settled and we
Got it.
know what's happening.
Okay,
You have to remember, not everybody in the district takes benefits. So
That's
two
true.
positions might
Might
not be
not
a huge
change that
impact
number,
because,
right.
because of the fact that, you know, not everyone that we have in the district takes benefits and that changes. So I think we just kind of have a placeholder there.
okay.
We take those into consideration, but that's also an account where you really have to look at history in order to kind of budget for it, just.
But if you have 300 employees and 290 of them take it and we get, you know, based on whether it's family or individual, it's a flat amount. So I don't know, it's not based on number of claims, it's just based on the number of employees that take that, right?
No.
Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
The deductible? Yes, it is.
The
The deductible is what is given to us into our HSAs, and that's a set amount, whether it's family or individual.
Yeah. But it also includes the grants. People,
Well, it's not a set amount either because it's a percentage depending on whether it's family or individual.
Right, that's
So
what I'm
it's
saying.
not,
So
it's not a set amount per employee because we don't know whether they'll be family. So I think that's what Scott's saying is
Oh,
that we have to look at the historical data
Oh,
and
okay.
kind of make the best guess we can because we can't predict whether we're gonna hire somebody with 5 kids or
I
whether we're
get
gonna
it.
hire somebody
Yes.
single or
Yes.
whether they're
No, I
gonna
get
take
it.
insurance or not take
Right.
insurance. So I think that's why Scott's saying we just look at the
I get
history
it.
to make the best guess.
That makes the way, okay, sorry.
That made sense to me too. That last part of Kim's
Yeah.
explanation kind of. sums
Because
it
the
up.
contract states how much the district gives us
Right.
based on whether we're family or single. And we're at 94% at this point
You're at 94% of the utilized budget for that this year. It
at
was
572.
At 572.
Glenn has a question.
Since
Go ahead.
Jason brought the ice in the employee benefits area. Of our $3 million increase. What is it? Yeah, 3,728,000 in health and life insurance, you know, that's 20. North of 20% of our increase
What
is
page are
just
you
in
on?
health. I'm sorry, line 5210. Page 2 of 6.
2 of 6. This one.
North of 25%, like, I don't know.
so could I can take that one, Scott, if you're okay.
Please.
So the city gives us a number of what we're going to pay. We should not be paying that much, and every year we will have this argument, every year. We can't absorb 25% increases, and our use does not demand that we should have a 25% increase. They have a lot of money sitting in the fund, but every year they try to initially get us to pay 125%, even though there's a reserve. So we will battle this along the way, but we have to fund the amount they've given us for now. And then when we go to the Board of Finance, we will work to get an
So that wasn't
adjustment
an
made.
estimated increase in premiums or anything like that? It's
No,
just
we're
a-
told the number.
We're told we have to set aside that much.
So I just want to clarify, because Robin didn't give us a number yet. So we estimated based on what we had and the claims and what we had at this point. So that is our number at 100%. It's not 125. I let the mayor know because you're right. Traditionally, they come in 125. But we have not received the number yet because we are meeting with Joe Spurgeon next Tuesday. And so that number may go up, may go down. We may have to do what we usually do, which is kind of the dance around the insurance. So Fiona's absolutely right. That's what we traditionally do year after year. To kind of figure out what that number ends up being, because it is a huge portion. of
That's
our
a huge.
It
huge
won't be
percent
less.
increase.
It won't ever be less than that?
Depends. I mean, if the board wants to consider, which I bring up every year, going out to bid for our own insurance, then we could probably get a lot less number.
Really? We can do that?
But that's a whole other,
Different discussion.
up for discussion.
Okay, yeah, not tonight.
No,
No.
not-
No, I am too, but not tonight.
What I do think we should do though is make an insurance subcommittee too.
You've been saying that for years too.
I've been saying it for years too. Nobody's fighting. Eventually somebody's gonna like it.
You on that. Yeah.
I think you
Yeah,
got it.
Justin,
we got
the new guy. Glenn's gonna ask
You
one
guys-
more
Okay, I got a couple.
And the other one I had, which was like a huge increase, was the technical services, it's page 3 of 6,
Yeah.
5350.
I got that.
So what we did was we cleaned up the next page, page 4. So just bear with me, 5530.05, licensing and warranty contract. We moved a lot of things to that tech services that were actually services. And we tried to keep the things that were licensing and warranty that were instructional in that line item. So that's why there was a shift.
When you
there.
say in that line item, which that are you referring to?
Okay, so we moved things from 5530.05 on
Yeah.
page 4 to, where now I lost it. 5350 on page 3. So we moved a number of things, and then we still had increases in our technical services.
Okay, so take out the 180. So we got 100, it's still
Yep.
north of 50% increase. Whatever.
There's a
Just
list.
because when you're really looking at the needs in terms of technology, and Alex can speak to this as well, I know she wasn't a part of this, but she lives in the tech world and the cyber world, and a lot of that is protection.
And
Right,
insurance
we-
requirements.
right, we added some. Sorry.
And insurance requirements.
And what, Alex?
Insurance requirements.
Oh,
For us to be able to maintain cyber protection insurance, we need to step up the game.
I can second that. It's brutal. We do some towns, and every time the assessment comes back, they ask you to do a million more things. It's expensive. I looked through the licensing list too.
Yeah.
Most of that, of your additions were like CrowdStrike and things like that.
Glenn, just to clarify for you, prior to, when we made this shift, we did it because we had things like in instructional licensing platforms that children were using in their classroom every day in the same line item as like our phone system, right?
Okay.
So we, right, we split.
Admin stuff, kid stuff.
Exactly,
Yeah, got it.
exactly.
Makes sense. I think that's all I have.
I have a couple.
Your chair's left.
I'm sure it's gonna-
She pointed at, she
Yeah.
pointed at, I heard. I want to go back to page 2 of the overall, page 2 of 6.
The original or?
No, it doesn't matter. It's the same page on both. I asked about the overtime wages last time, which is GL 5130, 30, 80, and 82. You guys increased them a little bit, but our existing experience has got us well over those numbers the last 2 years. So I wasn't sure if we had a reason we weren't carrying, we're over budget in the prior year or this year already. What's the thought on that?
So we talked with John about what his estimates were, and really it's a matter of monitoring it. We were talking last night at the facilities, well, it wasn't facilities, what were we last night? We ended up talking about facilities.
Policies.
Yes.
They're all blended together.
Facility
And so we
use.
were talking, yes, it was policy. Thank you, Ellen.
Facility
But we
use
were talking about
policy.
facility use.
Yes.
And so really trying to get a handle on who's coming in, what we're doing with our facilities, and then the subsequent overtime as well. So John felt like that still was well within what we needed for next year, and then really monitoring going forward.
If we're gonna be, I'm sorry. By all means.
I got a couple more.
I understand this topic.
Good.
So with that said, if we're increasing our facilities charges, we should be covering the cost of our custodians, right, which should
Okay.
offset any overtime costs.
So this is the tricky thing. So there's a revenue line item, and they will not allow you to use the revenue line item to pay for salaries. And the auditor is frown on that. They won't allow you to do that. So we have a revenue line item for exactly what you're saying, for facilities use fees and all those other things. But that's separate from our overtime.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just, it's, the facilities use fees are more to maintain the facility. And so you're gonna use that revenue to, you know, for
So it's
up,
gonna go back in. Okay,
correct.
gotcha.
But you still do get it, you're right.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay. That was good on that. Oh, I just lost it. I said, under the maintenance version, where the line item is now, the current one. General.
Page
What
3 of
page?
6.
I'm looking for, I saw
Page
that.
3 of 6, 5430-03, general maintenance.
Oh, yeah, we took out, so yeah, 543003, I had to find the old one, I knew it. It looks like we removed the $25,000 per building that we had talked about in facilities for the
Hold on.
HVAC certifications.
Yes.
Did we find out that we definitely don't have to do it?
What's happening is, and Ed can certainly speak to this as well, because he's our liaison with the Hartford folks. But from what I gleaned, you can certainly clarify, that they are realizing that this is going to be impossible to do within that time frame. So I think they're giving us more latitude. You want to jump in?
Yeah, there are a couple different sort of competing interests on this. So there's I forget it's an actual sort of long bureaucratic name, but there's like a working group on the air quality regulations in schools. So there's some legislation related to that moving through, and it could end with anything from a postponement to a repeal to state funding for it. And it's really all in the air. I have some meetings on the schedule to try and sort of get a sense of where the important legislators are at on this stuff, but it's really all up in the air because they're all hearing from people like us. They're all hearing from their school districts, from their maintenance people. The State Department of Education is now realizing that they're in a bit of a pickle and they want the legislature to bail them out. So it's a little bit up in the air.
So you only gave us 3 options. One of those wasn't the fourth one that said we had to pay for it, right?
Well, I don't think they'll leave it as it is, right? The requirement as it is would require us to pay for it, but I think there's enough movement that something will change.
So does anybody think that since it is technically still written in as a requirement, we're gonna go to the city with it, that it should be listed, because technically the state's requiring us to do it at this point.
Ed just set up a Zoom call for us on the 27th, I believe.
543003, page 3, towards the bottom.
General maintenance.
So
You have
what
to
we
look at the old
reduced
one
it to,
first.
just so that you know, we had 150, we've reduced it to 60. That, when I talked with John, he estimated 20,000 per school. We might be able to get 3 schools in next year. There's no way that we're gonna be able to get all our schools. It's just not physically
And we should
even
probably,
possible, which is what I've said to
right,
the
oh,
state.
since
other
the beginning,
superintendents
right.
have
It's
said
just
as well.
kind of crazy.
Right.
And maybe they'll fund it.
That's really what.
Yeah,
The
okay.
state's doing well financially.
One can hope,
Maybe
right?
in your world. not in this world.
I have one last one. It's the very last item on page 5. We asked about technology supplies
The
last
new
time.
page 5?
He's going between the two.
I'm trying
Okay.
to go between the two. Sometimes it doesn't show the change between them.
Okay, gotcha.
So it is the last 2 lines on the new page 5 as well as the old page 5. We are over this year, but we have reduced it by $15,000 from last year's number. I asked just for clarification. We thought it's technology, instructional tech supplies and non-instructional tech supplies. It's 5650, the bottom of page 5. It stays the same, but I just didn't.
Yeah.
And the conversation about chargers for computers came up. It was a,
Oh, right.
Oh, is that Laura's?
we did, it was talked about it, but
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it is?
Well, I don't know, is that my?
it's not
tab?
just that.
It could have been, because it all goes in there. Sorry, we're trying to.
Yeah, we're trying to remember to.
We can bring it for the next meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Some of them-
Yeah, so just we can take that.
Yeah. that was
Aside.
the thing.
Any other questions? Right now?
So for me, this is a lot to absorb. I need to go home and look through it all I can. Look at it and ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. You know what, we had a conversation, today. And Ed, maybe you could, I'm gonna put you on the spot. There's currently discussion about increasing minimum teacher salaries to $60,000 a year. Is that something that we should be considering looking at and
I haven't
coming up with numbers?
I haven't followed it in depth, but it strikes me as something that's dead on arrival in Hartford.
Oh, okay.
Because there are a lot of school districts that simply can't afford that. And they will all come kicking in the doors,
Okay.
begging for more ECS money that the state won't give them.
Okay. Maybe they could pay off their student loans.
Yeah, it also, if you want my sort of slightly less factual assessment of that would be that it also has some pretty serious implications for the state's power to abrogate collective bargaining agreements, which sort of puts them in a pickle. So I don't know. It's a serious proposal. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't need to have Scott like pounding the pavement trying to figure out what it would cost us if that were to happen.
Although they've overstepped in some other
Yeah,
ways.
can you look into it more? though?
I will,
Just 'cause
yeah, I can.
That seems to get quite a lot of support. I mean, in the theory of it's great, but.
Right. John,
Just to remind us, the last time they talked about this 30-something years ago, they actually did it.
they did do it.
They did.
Okay. So then maybe, look into it and let
Yeah, I
us
will.
know, and
I'll
then we
ask
can have like some numbers, start crunching numbers on what
Start
it would
panicking.
cost us, yeah, start to panic. But that gives us something to go to the city with and say, listen, if this goes through, we need this money. Okay.
I was just gonna say that historically, when the state, whether it's Department of Education or the Department of Labor implements things like that, there's usually a phased in timeline.
So we're not gonna have to pay
I
everybody.
likely, it would likely that if something, because I do agree that there's a lot of support for that. But I think that just like minimum wage, there was a
Sure,
structured increase
okay.
over the years. I think it would be here's what you gotta do this year.
Okay.
And then maybe next year it's gotta be this, and next year it's gotta be that,
And that-
and then that would give school districts
Time to
time to
budget.
absorb it and figure out how to pay for it and deal with the collective bargaining and all of those things.
And that would also impact salaries above that,
I mean,
right?
they may not, but that's historically what they
Right,
do.
because we
Yeah.
have
Right.
teachers, like 3 or 4 year teachers that are making 60,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
So it
Yes.
was just like a
That's
domino effect.
It's not just the new teachers that would be affected.
People affect all the way up,
Yeah.
All the way
all the
up.
way to the top.
Yeah, so Ed will look into it and. They increases.
1986.
1986?
Education and health.
We were juniors in high school when that happened. Me and Glenn.
I wonder why they didn't the way around.
Right? All right, I guess, anybody have any other questions on this, what we got tonight? No? No? All right, where'd the agenda go? What? Oh,
Yeah,
Laura,
I just wanted to say, I gave you 3 things.
okay.
I don't need to go over them right now. I just want you to know what they are. So Fiona, you had asked possibly for a flow chart of the RBT BCBA. Because I get it's confusing. I also included the descriptions so that you understand, like, everything goes under this BACB board, which is a very legal board that dictates everything. And then the BCBA is your master's level person who has passed that test. She's kind of in charge of everything. So it's kind of broken down for you. And then I put down who's in what schools and the number of RBTs in each place. Okay, and then, like I said, the job descriptions going from the BCBA to the BI to the RBTs and BTs and what that difference is, and then the paras. I gave that all to you, okay, and then in addition to that, I just wanted to give you a couple numbers. So we met with the principals the other day to just talk about the benefit of the BCBA RBT. Just a couple of numbers, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. At one of our elementary schools, one RBT involved since the beginning of the school year. So from September, August, really till now, till February, she had 2,163 support calls that she went and adhered to in the school. So if you think about that amount of support that offered to the principals, that's pretty significant. One person. In another school, it was a little bit less than that. It was still 1,434. And the only reason that's so much lower is because for several months at the beginning of the school year, we had a student who was having a lot of difficulty and really needed that one-on-one with that person until we were able to have that student outplaced. So
it wasn't reflective of the whole year.
correct, but I want you to try, I mean, we're talking about that first person almost 20 times in a day, they're going to support a child in crisis. So I think, please keep that in mind when you're looking through. You know, there was question about what's our, you know, why do we have them? I'm sure every single one of the principals can give you lots of reasons why, just like they did with the coaches. And then the only other thing that I wanted you to just see is that there is a flow chart that we went over with all of the principals. This was developed by the BCBAs. The process of when you're having a child that's having behavioral difficulty in a building, going from first time regular ed student through the process. So if you have questions, by all means, I can go into it. Not obviously gonna do it now, but okay.
Very helpful.
Thank you, Laura.
Yep.
All of this was, and, you know, to the point of just handing this out to us, getting the explanation of the coaches and what they're doing and the impact that they're making, that's so huge for us, so significant for us to hear and to continue to hear about it so that we can support those positions and everything that they're doing. So they're really good stories. All right, I think that's pretty good of the order.
Lines started getting installed at the middle school today.
Jason has
I
blinds.
have blinds.
Someone tell John.
The other thing is, I know that the plowing contract has been, but it's always been an issue, at least at the middle school, which has a lot of open space, that they plow into parking spaces and that we lose parking spaces. And I know that the middle school isn't one of those locations that is short on parking spaces, but others are. And it just seems that they could be completely clearing the parking lot of snow to some of those open spaces, and it doesn't seem as if they do. So just something to think about is, I know that plowing, I believe, is something that we're gonna be looking into. So,
I thought we bought, well, no, we paid an additional 20.
that's without the high school.
That was the high school.
So that's just,
We'll get an update.
yeah, it's just, I noticed that with this, I know there's a lot of snow in a short amount of time, but it seems every year we're losing parking spaces because they just dump it on those small islands.
Gotcha. John?
Great meeting. Thank you.
Yes, very good.
Ellen?
Great meeting, thank you.
What's that? Great meeting. Joanne? Ally? Nice to see you. Marissa?
Yes, your next meeting is next Wednesday at Vision.
Thank you.
Great meeting, thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank everybody for helping with bringing all this together.
Yeah, you guys are all
Who's here
amazing.
This evening as well, and sharing information with us, as well as, you know, everybody who's at the table and it really makes a difference. So, yeah, if you have any other questions between now and next Wednesday, please, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks, everyone. And thank you for staying and for coming to all of these meetings. Obviously, it's good that you're here because we learned. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?